Today I'm showing you how to paint this easy and quick flower watercolor painting. Here are the tools I'm using, and we're working with a white on white technique. Firstly, I'm dampening the whole page. Then I'm using a watery brush to dab some cadmium yellow medium hue, quinacridone rose, and rose of ultramarine here and there. The paper should be pretty wet, as with each stroke of color that I'm adding, a little water is added, preventing the paper from drying out. But just don't go too extreme and add lots of excess water, which could possibly cause too much water sitting on top and feel challenging to paint. I'm just using one brush for all these colors, that way I get about the same amount of water each time, and a large size brush makes it quicker. But if you prefer, you can totally use more than one brush. I'm adding a bit more water just at the bottom, in case this bit has gotten a little drier as I didn't add much paint here. Now I'm loading some white ink to this watery brush from Home Buying and dab it to the bottom of the page. As we can see here, the paint is flowing towards the top of the page, and this dispersing movement will also help each color to blend in naturally, even if the previous strokes seem separated and blotchy. In my previous video, I mentioned that this wet ink can leave a blotch when it comes to in contact with watercolor. That's because at the time I wasn't applied at the very beginning. The paper wasn't at its wettest. But this time, I'm adding the wet ink right when I lay down the first batch of color. So as long as there's enough water both on the paper and on your brush with the wet ink, it will blend in naturally with the background. You can also try this out on a square piece of paper first, just to get a feel for how much water helps them merge smoothly. Now I'm using a little damp thin brush, loading some rolls of ultramarine from the tin. This brush shouldn't have much water. You can try to keep the water minimum by using a clean dry napkin to absorb some excess. Keeping the amount of water just enough for rehydrating in the paint would be fine. Before the page is dry, I'm dabbing the paint here and there. As you can see here, even if I don't have much water on the brush, the paint still disperses well due to the existing water on the paper. But if you have more water on your brush, the color will spread too much, you may end up with backgrounds. And don't worry if these shapes are a bit unnatural or not so ideal, as they will gradually fade or soften up along with the drying process of the paper. When softening a color, remember to clean and dry your brush after each lift. Actually, with some experience, you'll develop a feel for when the brush needs rinsing. However, to ensure it doesn't damage your painting, it's safest to clean the brush every time after lifting. If the stems have harsh edges, you can gently soften them a few times with a clean, dry brush. What we can do now is to use thicker and thicker paint coverage when we go in for the second time to add more paint on top of the fake shape. And this time we should dab smaller areas and add a little more detail. It's important to dab naturally without covering the whole flower area, as doing that would make the shape feel too stiff. If the paint you're adding to the paper is still spreading at this stage, it's probably because your brush has too much water. When deepening the color, don't go through each stem or flower in order or darken everything out at once. You can start selectively with the flowers roughly in the center area of the paper. And for flowers that are further away, you can add dabs only in certain spots. Avoid making large areas of the flowers too dark. One thing to keep in mind, if your paint is different from mine, try to avoid using colors that are very staining. Otherwise, even if you lift color, it might leave unwanted marks. At this stage, we can use a thinner round brush to lift some circular bubbles to add some dreamy effects. The paper is getting a little drier now, but it's still damp enough to give us a weak round boundary, which can keep the bubbles soft and dreamy. Now the paper has gotten much drier than before. I'm loading the same purplish color as we used for the flowers onto an almost dry brush and dabbing some dots for more defined and eye-catching flowers. As we can see here, this paint doesn't spread at all as the surface of the page is almost dry, so we can use a slightly damp brush to soften these colors for a more vivid look. Next, I'll paint several flowers using the same method. When you're painting, just make sure not to make all the flowers exactly the same. A little variation will make the overall composition look more natural. I'm adding some more small flowers to appear further away. We can also refine the bubbles. Finally, I'm adding some small dots using the white ink. Do not add extra water at this step. And also we can paint some white ink on the flowers for highlights once the flowers are completely dry. That's all for today's painting tutorial, and thanks so much for watching until the end. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. See you next time!